Hello, everybody. Welcome in episode 1 of the Evolution Podcast, joined with Bobby Valentine Sports Academy. I'm your host, Frank Rampin, with Mike Satuti, Tim Giuliano, Brian Wolf, and Nick Savali. So we're going to be talking about common injuries in sports, and let's start things off. What do you want to start with here, Brian?
We're just talking UCL injuries, so I feel like those statistics we were chatting about before.
All right, let's talk about some UCL. So UCL injuries has been one of the up and up injuries in all of baseball, and specifically in the younger generation. So what we found, from 57% to 67%, depending on the study, of Tommy John surgeries are from kids 15 to 20 years old. So such a young age group of kids that lead in Tommy John surgeries. That can't be good for baseball, and the Tommy John epidemic just continues to rise. It's crazy.
Yeah. I think it's a combination of a couple different factors, honestly. And I know we were kind of spitballing before and like what we were talking about before. To me, I remember reading this article when I was in college in PT school about Tim Lincecum, right? And they were looking at the amount of torque that he was throwing a 95-mile-an-hour fastball on the UCL and what he was doing. It was something along the lines, I just remember the statistics. It was like he was putting about 45 newtons of force per pressure through that joint, and at 46, they were snapping them on cadavers. And so the reality is people are just throwing harder. I think there's some repetitive stress to it, that the year-round athlete, not enough off-season as well. But when you think about that statistic specifically on the 15, 16, 17-year-old athlete, I think a lot of these kids are throwing harder, but not getting necessarily stronger and not hitting the growth spurt a little differently. They're not doing what they need to do in the gym. The number one reason for why we should be exercising and doing any fitness at any kind, whether you're an adult or a kid or an athlete, is injury prevention. The secondary is performance. And so to me, that's something that's usually lacking in these programs as well. So it's kind of people are throwing harder, they're not doing the things they need to do to prevent injury, and then ultimately what's happening is the repetitive stress of no off-season doesn't allow you to heal, and boom, it pops.
Yeah, we see that as well from the training perspective, from a biomechanical training perspective, is these kids, like you said, mass times acceleration equals force. Mm-hmm. So they are all bigger, faster bodies based on the way we're training them now at a younger age, moving a lot quicker. And then we see a lot of times too is they're having deceleration issues, is they're not slowing down properly. Pitching is one of the most violent acceleration and deceleration in short time period and space in all the sports. And if we do not decelerate properly, that's when we start seeing these issues kind of radiate up the chain a little bit. And a lot of the training now with these max pull downs and that we're seeing, especially as they're occurring in the time of the year where other people used to be shutting down and really getting on that rehab process of their off season, we're not seeing that anymore. We're seeing the kids throw year round. Some of them, they're kind of forced into it when it comes to a college recruiting perspective, is they can only have so many times that they can go to these camps. These college camps are running in November, December, January, February. So these pitchers don't have a shutdown time. They finish their summer season at the end of August, mid-August. Some of them take a little breather there. They kick up fall ball again. They're throwing every weekend, sometimes multiple times a weekend. If they're not training properly, not keeping their body ready. And now they have to try to figure out how to continue that path at full capacity all the way up to the next calendar year, continue that through their preseason, and then be ready on April 1st for the next season. And it's a lot of stress that these kids put themselves through. And the recruiting perspective, I think the way that process works, we're starting to see kids that have to throw year round. When we were growing up playing, there was more like, hey, after October, you shut this thing down for 3 months. You get big, strong, fast, don't pick up a baseball for a couple months, work on your skill sets. And then January, let's kick this back up and start working on the training again. And then we have the blend of the training with you guys changes, get more focus on flexibility, and you could speak to that a little bit more. Instead of the strength building, start to tailor the training as they get closer to the season.
I mean, my biggest thing is, and I think Nick can probably go to this too, is like I think there's a huge disconnect between what a pitching coach is and what the strength and conditioning side is doing, and then from a physical therapy standpoint as well. So like, it's one thing to talk about recruiting and off-season and all that stuff, but we can make that work, but it's got to be a holistic approach. And I don't think anybody's taking a holistic approach. So you're like talking about throwdowns and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, that's from a pitching perspective, right? So that's your pitching coach. But then these kids don't realize how that's also affecting them from a weight room perspective and all that kind of stuff, as well as volume. You know, how many times are you doing that? Great, your coach is telling you to do that. And yes, you might progress. But then if your body's not ready to go, then this isn't all going to add up.
Right.
So it's really like we got it. If you really want to do it right, it's got to be sitting down, doing it the right way from the get-go of like, okay, here's our strength and conditioning program. This is also matching up with your pitching and throwing program.
Right.
And there's also a physical therapy aspect to it that we're making sure we're correcting everything on the back end as well.
Right.
But number one, the biggest thing that should be coming first is your strength and conditioning program and your speed program, right? You're talking about deceleration. That should be done on the turf. But how does that start? It's got to start in the weight room first, and it's got to all be a building block setup. And I don't think anybody's setting the building blocks up. There's no basement, right? So if there's no basement, that structure is always going to fall down. And that's, I think, what we're seeing over and over and over again, time and time again. And that's where this whole epidemic is coming from. And I'm sure Nick's going to see it even more from a physical therapy standpoint. So that's kind of my take from it, is we got to start from ground zero first, and we're not doing that.
I think too, even like you're talking about like the compliance side, right? Mm-hmm. So like I see the argument on both sides of like the multi-sport athlete. They'll get natural time off, and then they'll actually get different adaptation that way. Mm-hmm. But then it also causes you to deviate from your strength and conditioning program. But then there's the argument, well, the single sport athlete who doesn't have to deviate off that program can then also like move in different directions. That debate, and that, I mean, that's a whole other podcast on its own, right? Absolutely. Like that, I feel like that's the debate that happens. It's like actually the compliance in which you can.
Mm-hmm. Nick, I have a question for you based on what you've seen throughout the calendar year. Have you found like these year-round baseball-specific athletes have different range of motions based on where they are in their season and how their body is?
Yeah, as you go further into their second or third season in a row, they're going to lose range of motion throughout their shoulder, but even more so hips and back. And that, when you talk about deceleration, that's where it truly comes from. If your arm can come through the zone as fast as you can get it, but you don't have the hip and back mobility to slow it down after, that's where all these arm injuries are coming in. Mm-hmm. And by the time kids are getting into late summer, fall, like right now, most people are coming in and it's forearm pain, but their issue is their backs and hips are so tight, they can't even like turn to the side without feeling something. But that's not what the focus is, and that's not necessarily something even a pitching coach is going to talk to them about. Because they're going to say, oh, your forearm's hurt, we got to do like more strengthening or more stretching for the forearm, and it's not even close to what they need. I totally agree with what you said about taking the time off, and it's not just when we were growing up. It's major leaguers currently is closer to the schedule that you described, where it's as soon as we're knocked out of the playoffs or I'm done with my regular season, I don't touch a baseball till almost holiday time, late December, mid-December. So when kids are coming in with that recruiting schedule that you described, if they're playing fall ball, they're doomed. It's like you have to treat that as your off season. And if your goal is I want to get into college, that's the whole point of why I'm doing this, but you're playing fall ball and not meaningless, but you're throwing 85 pitches every 5 days for 2 months leading up to it. Like you got to figure out the priorities, and then it partly comes from parents not letting their kids be pressured by these coaches, being like, this is the most important thing I've ever coached is this fall ball team.
Yeah.
Like,
because they have that tournament down in Georgia where some college coaches are going to be
quote unquote
ready for it.
And you have to decide as a parent and as a kid, like, what is the goal of this? Because if it's just I want to play baseball with my friends, then great, do whatever you want. Right. But if your goal is to get into college and not go through this Tommy John process, have it ruin your next year and a half, then you have to give yourself time off. And you have to stand up for yourself.
It seems like that at some point in time, pitching, and especially starting pitching in baseball, it went from being a marathon to now being a sprint. Like relief pitchers, they come in, they empty the tank for 1 inning. They throw as hard as they can. They throw 100 miles an hour. They throw their nasty sliders. Now that's what the starting pitchers are doing. And they're trying to do it for 5-6 innings. And it's just blowing out their arms. I don't know when that changed, but somebody changed the marathon to a sprint for the starting pitcher.
I actually really changed with Justin Verlander. I feel like he was the one that changed the game, because I remember being like, when he first came out, I was like, yo, here's this cat throwing 98 miles an hour as a starter for and was throwing just as hard. And I think that, I don't want to say put the pressure, but people wanted to be like that, man. I mean, myself included. I was like, that's badass. Exactly. Well, exactly, right? So I think it changed his velo. And to touch on kind of what Mike talked about, or what Mike and Nick were talking about just now, was the idea of that off period. And I kind of started the story before we're recording, but I remember exactly, this is like 10, 12 years ago, I was treating 3 baseball players. One was a pro baseball player with the Red Sox. One was a Division I baseball player. And another one was a high school baseball player who was going into his junior year. And I remember like talking with each one of their routines. And I remember being blown away by the person who took the most time off and was doing all the stuff in the gym and doing all the right stuff was the Major League Baseball player. And the person who clearly was taking the least time off was the high school baseball player. And I just remember fielding the call, to your point about those statistics, at 16 years old, his junior year, he blew out his UCL. And he was calling me like, is there anything we can do? Is that piece? And unfortunately, the problem with this injury, I think one of the other reasons for why the surgery rates are also so high, the good news is the surgery is actually usually pretty successful. For most, ACL surgery, it's two out of three people will get back to their previous level. That's actually quite low. Yeah, because that means 33% of athletes are never going to get their previous level. UCL is way higher. So the good news is if you do blow out your UCL, there's a process. The rehab process is really honed in. The return to performance, it's about a year. In fact, now they're getting even faster with some of the stuff they're doing with surgeries. But I think that's the other reason for why it's inflated too.
And there was a time when people used to say, like, when somebody got Tommy John, I remember this was a big thing with Steven Strasburg. When he came back, people were saying, oh, he's even better.
Yeah.
What is your thought to, like, the Tommy John making you a better pitcher after you get it?
That if you went through the rehab process without surgery, you'd be better.
Yeah.
It's 100%. Nothing to do with the structure in your elbow.
Gotcha.
You are just going through the process of exactly what Mike laid out. You're starting from the beginning, you're laying your foundation, you're doing your rehab, you're focusing on your shoulder and your flexibility, and you're resting.
So your training process.
And so, wow, he comes back. Yeah, so it forces people to like stop and just like actually take time. And so it has nothing to do with the surgery making you throw harder. It's all the preparation. Mm-hmm. It's like, wow, you put a year of your life into preparation. Well, look what happens. You come back throwing harder.
Right.
And what we were talking about before is the average fastball is getting much faster. It's over 94 miles an hour for starters is the average, which used to be like, okay, now you're top of the list if you're throwing that.
Right.
And the top 5 guys, average four-seam fastball in the league right now. Skeens hasn't turned 24 yet. And then Jose Soriano, 2 Tommy Johns. Sandy Alcantara, Tommy John. Tarek Skubal, Tommy John. DeGrom, 2 Tommy Johns. That's the top 5.
Do you think that there's something to do with like how Skeens was a catcher for his whole life? He didn't pitch, so he didn't have that same. Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have the same wear and tear on that arm.
Yeah.
So
He's
that
only 23. Exactly. So the next few years, I don't know what happens, but he does tend to have some of the best mechanics in terms of trunk mobility, and his warm-ups are becoming more popular now, which is awesome. A lot of trunk rotation with weighted stuff on his back, which is helpful, and it's part of the equation. I guarantee people will take that and run with it and do some weird stuff off it. But
They already are.
ultimately, he has
They don't understand why he's doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
separation of lower to upper
We
back.
also talked about the end range before too. He gets to the end range with his whole chest, hits,
Oh, yeah.
and then recoils. Where a
And
lot
then
of these guys
bending
just get
back.
to the end range with their arm whip,
Yeah.
and then their arm bounces back.
When
But,
you
like,
see guys'
nothing
arms
of
bounce
this
off their
speaks to
chest,
deceleration. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a horse. He is the perfect body type. He's strong. He's a catcher, and like everything is lined up well for him. But also, is anyone gonna be surprised if he gets Tommy John in a year?
No.
Because he's throwing 97.7 as an average fastball.
on statistics and history.
Yeah.
they're not overworking him like crazy right now. I mean, Pittsburgh is not in it, so they have the luxury to do that. But they're not letting him throw 100 pitches.
I would make the argument though, just based off of like, because I like what Nick said on both sides of that. I actually would think that for most people, if you actually just put in the work, like like what we were talking about, is you're taking the time off, then you're doing the preparation to recover. Because we should also, Mike, talk about in-season training as well and the importance of in-season training. Because, well, that's great. Well, what do I do too, right? But because we lose so many baseball athletes in season for our jobs, and we look at it, we're like, this is the time you need to be maintaining what we just built, and that way it prevents injury. Because I think one of the other pieces is, I would almost argue that it's more important to be training year-round from the S&C perspective, injury prevention perspective, and then taking a little time off here for baseball. However, I think if you took the time off and didn't do anything with it and then just threw that hard, like we were talking about Achilles injuries, the difference is just like with basketball, the reason Achilles injuries are higher in basketball is because these guys are 6'8" and they're jumping. That's just going to it's an explosive movement. The same exact thing for UCL. That's why you see guys who tear UCLs like in the NFL, but they can be back in 2-3 weeks because they're not throwing athletes. It's a throwing athlete. It's an explosive movement. So I think the important piece of it is actually also the in-season training, the off-season training. That to me is more encompassing. That's something, and then Nick nailed it. I think Skeens is also built like a moose. So I think he's just the perfect. Exact. You have a genetic disposition, and you're working really well in season, off season.
Yeah.
Again, that's still because he's so explosive. Could still lead to Tommy John. We wouldn't be surprised. But
If we go back to even Nick talking about like all the stuff that Skeens does before he pitches, how many kids do you know that actually have a 45-minute to an hour dynamic warm-up before they pitch and do it the right way?
It's getting better.
Right? It's
Last
getting
year,
there.
it's
It's
getting
getting better. But how many
Yeah.
kids take their bands out and do a couple external rotations for like 30 seconds? They're like, okay, I'm good. I can go out on the mound and throw now.
Incorrectly, too.
Exactly. And I think that's another huge thing is like there's such a lack of education on the coaching side. There is so much shit baseball coaching out there. It's horrible. It's like that's really your pandemic. If you
Yeah.
really want to like go down the rabbit hole here, that's where it all starts because these guys aren't educated. You have dad that just got off the couch that thinks that like because I threw soft toss to a kid, he got better today. And that's not how it's working. We don't understand the biomechanics. We don't understand the S&C stuff. We don't understand all the PT stuff. And that's really where it's starting. It's ground zero. So if anything, it's like, why isn't Major League Baseball or a large baseball organization sitting down and coming up with a true standardized method that starts at the ground zero with Little League and builds these kids up along the way? You know, football's done a great job, I think, with Pop Warner and stuff, especially when you look at head injuries and concussions and stuff like that. Hey, let's sit down as an organization. Let's get the NFL involved. Let's get the NCAA involved. Let's make sure there's standardized practices so that by the time these kids get up to the highest level, there's less opportunity to injury. So I think that's another huge piece of it. But like a dynamic warm up, and then like you're saying, in-season training. How many kids understand residuals? Like not every kid gets that a strength and conditioning program is to take you from ground zero to the top tier of that pyramid, get you into a power phase. And that power phase and that production that your body can do with your tendons and everything, right? That residual is only going to last for maybe 12 weeks if you're not training properly. And that's if you're a freaking amazing athlete, like a professional athlete, you get that little bit of percentage. So if you're not constantly maintaining throughout the season, which a lot of these kids do, and it's not even their fault, goes back to shitty coaching. A baseball coach in high school, they get an hour and a half long practice in the afternoon after school. How many of these kids are going to have the opportunity to get in the weight room and also do their homework and do all the extra stuff? Kids are lazy. They're not going to do any of that. They're probably not going to lift. Lifting's hard, not fun. So they're not going to do that. And now we're also adding on to that pandemic. So it's like this X factor is huge all the way across the board in multiple different ways.
And to speak to that, we can clearly tell when the kids are with you in season and still coming to us and touching up on their skills. We know the ones that continue to work out because there's no loss. The ones that do leave you guys in season, there's that drop from when they leave at the end of March to when they start really coming back the beginning of September area. We see that drop from a velocity perspective, from a capacity perspective, just an ability to hold above the rubber and find stability there. When they're with you guys on a weekly basis, I mean, you know, a couple days a week with you guys, we see all those issues start to clean up. Things that we can explain and we can drill as much as we can from a biomechanical perspective, but they can't simply do it because their body's not in the right shape or doesn't have the right mobility in the right position. When they're with you guys, we start to see those issues clean up and their drills and their reps just become better and cleaner and more efficient. And we can tell them and put them in the proper position all they want, but if their body can't get there, then they're never going to have success.
My goal is to make their body so efficient that when I hand it off to their sports coach and they do sports specific training, that it should be easy for you. You should have accessibility through your body to do anything you want to do, but you can't do that unless you're doing X, Y, and Z in the weight room. And that's a whole nother issue too of like kids don't understand that it shouldn't be sports specific movement patterns inside the weight room. It should be general adaptation and like squatting and hip hinging and crawling and doing all the simple stuff, which also kids don't want to do. So it all adds up into this accumulation of why we're having all these injuries.
Do Mike talk a little bit about, because like for me, I tell parents all the time, I was like, one of the things of why like I got into this and like love this profession so much and the difference between physical therapy and fitness is I was the athlete from a performance perspective, particularly in baseball, because I would come off a wrestling season, right? I'd be lifting and being strong, and I would come out of the gate every time in my seasons super hot, and my issue was then I would fall off. And now, obviously, knowing what I know now, I tell right every
Now you know why.
and now I know why. And I joked about, I was like, I wish someone told me, right?
Right.
So I think the bigger thing for me is obviously I wasn't doing the in-season training. I was losing that adaptation, and then I would always struggle. And then of course, baseball is such a mental game, right? So now all of a sudden I'm like, oh my god, am I doing this differently? Is it because I wore my hat the wrong way, right? Like it's like you're going into a crazy piece where it's much simpler. So I think talk a little bit about like off-season and in-season training. Obviously, we've talked about the importance of, from a performance perspective and obviously from an injury perspective, but just even like from like a tactical perspective, what we do and how we do it. I know we all know what we do, but talk about it because we're gonna talk about like
So it's a big ball of yarn that we're gonna pull out here, but like if you think about the pyramid, right, and like if we're gonna put a solid base in and kind of slowly tier you up, if we're talking about right now, right, like instead of playing fall ball, you should be in the weight room probably 4 to 5 days a week, going through a general physical preparation phase and teaching your body to go through all these movement patterns again under a slow load in eccentric protocols, building up resiliency, building up neuromuscular capacity. And once we get through that over the next 12 to probably 16 weeks, then we shift into another hypertrophy phase where we're going to build elasticity, we're going to build resiliency in the body and cardiovascular and a whole bunch of other different things. I can go down the rabbit hole there. Then obviously the next tier of that pyramid is we're probably working on submaximal strength, and now we're getting ourselves stronger, right? And after we get to a certain point that we're strong enough, now I have the ability and I have the base in your body. Now we can get more sports specific and we can start doing power exercises that move in the same similar movement patterns that Tim's going to need you to use or Nick's going to need to use in their pitching protocols. And that's where we start to peak the athlete. Then right before the season, we're going to go super, super heavy and super, super hard and super like 6x1, and all I care about is barbell path and barbell movement and how quickly that barbell is moving, so it all transfers then into what they're doing out on the field. And once that athlete is peaked and I can push them then to their coach, that's where it all really starts, and that's why you're feeling like 100% right in those first couple weeks of the season. Exactly. The hard part is the average person doesn't understand that there's a residual factor to that. That residual is only going to last maybe 12 to 16 weeks if we did everything properly, had no other problems, no X factors involved. Finally, you're peaked. But so if we're not going to do anything extra in those 12 to 16 weeks, then that residual isn't going to be able to hold, and eventually you're going to fall down the rabbit hole, and we're just going to keep going and going and going.
And then they come back at the end of the season 2 blocks from where they left us.
And you got to think about this too. We're going to go through a high school season, and then right after high school season, you're going to do your travel season, and then maybe I get to see you early August at best, and it's too late at that point. And now we start all over again. Everything I just explained, we start the year all over again. And we just had a conversation about one of our athletes that did that this summer, and we're starting back at ground zero, and he doesn't have the work capacity to even get through an hour workout. Right. And we got about like 30 minutes of that hour workout done in an hour and 15 minutes. Right? So like now we're starting from ground zero. So how the hell is that kid supposed to get on the mound in fall ball and pitch again when he doesn't even have the work capacity to get through a workout under eccentric protocols at 50%?
And then
so it's just not going to happen.
What does that do to his risk of injury?
Right.
How much does that increase that?
Exactly. So it's a full circle thing.
Exactly
but it starts
what you would imagine.
Yep.
It's exactly what you would think it is. And the other thing that we're seeing in a lot of the athletes we all work with, they're also in a phase of their life where they might grow 6 inches in that time. So you've got your bones, right? You've got the bones in your arms and legs and spine. Everything's growing, and the tendons and muscles can't always keep up with that.
Yep.
So now you're talking about even less mobility, even less strength per pound that you have on you. And it all comes together with everything you just said, plus the growth of these individuals, plus this is the prime time for college recruitment. Mm-hmm. And if they have a college coach that's at this showcase that they want, they're gonna blow it out. They're gonna do whatever they can to throw 1 mile an hour faster.
Yep.
And the problem with all this, which isn't necessarily solvable, is if that gets them a scholarship, it's worth it to them.
Right.
For sure.
So it's not even them. Mom and dad feel like it's a check mark for them because they got their kid to college.
And it's not really just it's not just us against throwing harder.
Nope.
It's having the conversation and getting the information out there that you can throw harder, but there's so much other stuff you have to do to get to that point. We're not asking you to go out there and like throw 60%. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to give your body a 100% workload, you need to put every possible other thing into it. And it's like there's a lot of analogies to cars. Like if you're just going to slam on the gas till it hits the floor, and then slam on the brakes to stop it, and you do that over and over again without changing the oil, changing the tires, and all the car stuff, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah.
And even going into the professional ranks, you've got guys who are on rookie contracts their first few years in the majors, if they're lucky enough to make it that far. And teams are thinking about arbitration. And they're like, if he does get hurt, we don't have to pay him as much. And so you start looking at those first, when do people get Tommy John surgeries when they're in the majors? Usually it's as they're approaching that arbitration, those arbitration years. So you also have this third party, the coaching staff or the team or organizations like, what can I get out of this guy now? Keep him cheap for when he comes back, and we still have control. It's like same with college pitchers.
Yep.
Let me burn out my freshman. By the time he gets his Tommy John next year, I'll have another recruit coming in.
Right.
And so it's like we're not only battling physics and biomechanics, we're battling some coaches,
Right.
which is hard. It's business. So it's just giving athletes a little bit more perspective on where all this stuff comes from and helping them stand up for themselves is huge.
Yep.
And it's really scary as a young athlete to do that and like think, I'm going to stand up to my college coach? What do you mean? So it's a whole nother
You guys
side.
nailed it on the head. It's a business, right?
Yeah.
Fall ball exists because there's extra money involved, and that's the other huge problem. It's a pandemic across the United States is youth sports equals money, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons we're all sitting here. We have jobs right now because of youth sports, right? But luckily, we're trying to do it the right way. The horrible part is that we have fall baseball because it's a huge moneymaker. We have soccer year-round because it's a huge moneymaker. We have all these 7-on-7 football camps that are an absolute waste of time, and I can speak to that because of the head coach in college football, that's another moneymaker, right? But we're not giving the athlete the opportunity to actually get their bodies better. It's all about this at the end of the day, and you're even seeing it at the Major League Baseball level. It's absolutely disgusting.
The
It's a
recruiting
shame.
process going into college is a moneymaker now.
Right.
The colleges
Yep.
have their college camps. They have an invite list of 3,000 kids. They just send a group email out to, and we'll get as many as we can for
Yep.
$300, $400 a pop, and we just fundraise for our team.
Yep.
And then if we pick out 2-3 kids out of this that we're actually interested in, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
we win, right?
Mhm.
And you see it at college football level too. You see all these summer camps, right? You're at this D1 school. If you spend $65, you get to go to this camp. You show up, there's 500 kids there. You're not even getting looked at. And a lot of the times it's just to pay the assistant coaching staff because they only get paid $20K a year.
Right.
That's the whole point of it. But these kids think it's part of it. And now they're not training those days. Instead, they're out running a 40-yard sprint at 100% capacity, and now their max V's all screwed up and jacked up, and now we're back to ground zero back in the weight room.
And
So
it's
it's just a
really
constant
hard for
circle.
A young kid to kind of tailor his excitement when he gets a letter from a college coach
Oh, yeah.
and thinking that they're wanted in that situation to actually really dissect, is this real interest? Is this a right fit for me as an athlete and academically? Or is this a money grab?
Yep.
Because the best way to get recruited is to get in front of the head coach on their own campus. That's still the best way to do it. So it is a balance there, and I think realistic expectations, like you were talking about earlier, is one of the things that these kids can adjust a little bit, have better goals and have better realistic expectations on what they want out of their career, and then you work from the end goal back and how do we get there?
Yeah, I think you touched on something really important. Like I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of professional athletes, right, in my career now. And I think one of the things that I've recognized, because again, now as a former athlete myself, but also as a parent to a youth athlete, we've talked about this, is like the pressure to like make sure every kid's in the fall this winter this is crazy to the point where you feel like you're being left behind.
Yes.
And it's a misrepresentation and like a lack of prioritizing the right things for certain people. So I think parents can get swept in as well. Like it's really, to me, the biggest thing that I found is whatever someone's passion is or whatever their child is like trying to do, and whether it's playing professional sports, playing college sports, just even making a high school baseball team, right? Like all those things take different commitment, but they also really revolve around similar blueprints. I've said this about athletes all the time. What I was always surprised about that I wish I told a younger version of me was every pro athlete that I've ever seen has totally different stories. Every single one of them, because you get to know those people. So we all used to think, oh, by your junior year, you have to be recruited to go Division I in college. That doesn't mean anything. No. In fact, if you look at guys like Aaron Judge and Jason Dominguez, right? Jason Dominguez was supposed to be this phenom at 15 years old, and Bryce Harper, right? Yeah. Whereas Aaron Judge was actually kind of a late bloomer to a degree, right? And so like look at the difference of like superstar. Like no one knew who Shohei Ohtani was until all of a sudden he started pitching, throwing 99 miles an hour and hitting bombs, right? So a lot of athletes are all in different pieces. If there's three things that I think every pro athlete has in common, I've said this over and over and over again, it's three things. One is they have just some sort of genetic disposition, right? And it's not to take away from the athlete. Just the stuff, the sport picks the athlete, but the athlete also picks the sport. So if I can throw really hard, typically baseball is going to be my wheelhouse. If I can run really fast, like that's good. Michael Phelps, I have a really big body that can swim like crazy. I'm genetically predisposed.
Yeah.
Exactly, I can do that, right? So that's one. Two, you love the sport. Like like you see it as play. So especially if like you're a parent and you're talking about this, my son, I want him desperately to love baseball more. He doesn't. It's not his thing. But maybe it'll like sort of shove it down his throat is going to be a bad thing. Could also lead to injury, by the way. Mm-hmm. And one of those things where if he loves it down the road, fantastic. If he doesn't, that's cool too. But if he starts to love it, I know it's going to feed in the third major thing, which is they're going to work their absolute tail off. And that's the third part. So it's like, I have this genetic disposition. I really love it because I'm really good at it, or I also love doing that. So I also work my butt off doing it. That's where people, when parents come to us about, well, I don't know if they have time to do the training in the gym. Well, they can't do the in-season.
Well, then you don't love it and you're not
Exactly.
obsessed with it. And I honestly think love is not even the right word. It's an obsession. Like all the professional athletes that I've gotten the pleasure of working with, that you've also had the opportunity with, they are obsessed. It's a 24/7 concept. Like these guys go home and that's all they're looking at. That's all they're reading. That's all they're doing. And like, even if they're playing a video game, they're literally playing that video game of like football or baseball or whatever. They live through it 24/7. And a lot of these kids don't realize that. So it's an obsession about the weight room. It's an obsession about the intricacies, the coaching, all that stuff. It all wraps into it. And then you put the work ethic on top of that and it's game over.
To your point, I got a funny story about that. Cause like I've worked with injuries where people have a neck and back pain, like in pro soccer, like where I do a lot of stuff. And it'll be the athlete who'll be like, they come to the facility early, they'll train, they'll be watching soccer at the facility after they're training, while they're doing the lift, while they're getting their treatment. Then they'll go home, they'll watch soccer, and then they'll play FIFA till like 1 or 2 in the morning. And actually they'll come up, my back's bothering me. And I'm like, well, were you sitting the whole time? Like, why are you playing FIFA? And I was like, so like they were so obsessed that they hurt themselves through the obsession. To your point, like in a hilarious way of like sitting there playing video games, right? So it's like, I think, and that's a pro athlete, right? So I think the key is finding the fine balance, but also prioritizing the right stuff. Because I think, to your point, so many people are like, I want to play sports, I want to do this, I want to be on these teams, I want to throw, and then they're not doing the things to prevent the injuries. They're not doing the things that we need to do to get bigger, faster, stronger. Like a lot of people could just do that a lot more and actually play less, and they would see their performance go through the roof. You know what I mean? That's a lot of what I would suggest.
Less sports specific. I think that's a huge epidemic, is that SPP, that everybody thinks everything's got to be sports specific. And like, it's a epidemic in strength and conditioning field, especially with guys that don't know what the hell they're doing. They're doing all this tactical training. Why the hell am I going? If I'm not a lacrosse coach, I'm a strength and conditioning coach, and I'm going to a facility and I'm running around with my stick and dodging in and out and doing tactical work. You didn't get any better. You didn't get any stronger. You might have gotten technically better, but that's not going to help you once you get out onto the field. And that's the other part too, is kids don't understand what is right and what is wrong in season and out of season, and how that all transfers together, and how coaches are using a sport-specific model to ultimately bring you in and take your money, but we're not getting you better. It's the dull, boring stuff that's actually going to get you better.
That's the stuff that I think changed a lot, like when I was growing up.
Yep,
like, when I was like younger, I was playing everything. I played everything. And then by the time I was in like high school, it felt like everyone was like, this is my sport. This is my sport. Like, that seems really weird to me. Like, play everything.
Yep.
It gives you everything you need. And
I think a lot of us growing up, we played multiple sports in high school, multiple different things, and now it's like you got to be so zoned in. And it goes back to the money aspect of everything, right? Like, if I have all these camps coming up that I have to go to, that didn't exist when we were kids. I don't remember doing that. Either that or my parents weren't going to freaking pay for it, but that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I think that it comes back to this whole money juggernaut problem that we also have, and the college recruiting problems, and it's ridiculous. I mean, NIL is making it even worse. So
I think, the overarching point, which might be the last thing we have time for today, is just how do we communicate this to people who don't know as much as us about just seeing it through the eyes of our athletes that we see and having some experience in these sports. And really the big thing is just taking the time to emphasize how important the non-throwing part of this is. Or if you're a football player who's a lineman, like how important it is to not just do lineman drills all day long.
Yep.
And that it's very difficult because let the kids know, but also the parents.
The coaches need to know this, right?
There's somebody driving them to all these things.
Yep.
Like they have to be a part of this too. Or whoever the guardian is has to be in their ear as well and saying like, we've talked to people who know what they're talking about, and you can't just go out and throw a baseball 11 out of the 12 months of the year. And it's really difficult. Like we talked, there's a lot of pressure, and it feels like as the player that's the right thing to do. You're like, oh man, like Justin Verlander must have, thrown 300 innings a year through his whole life. Like that's probably how he did it. And I think just it's as simple as telling people sometimes, like, no, he actually squats like 350 pounds and he works out all the time. Explain to them that these guys get to the field at 12 for a 7 o'clock game. It's not, they're not hitting batting practice all the time. And some of the biggest injuries I've seen this year was kid tore his labrum on a 2-hour hitting session as a 15-year-old who also grew 6 inches that year. We had a kid come in off of a forearm fracture from throwing, and his pitching coach had him throwing a 2-pound ball at full velocity into a wall as a warm-up.
Running guns with
So,
the overweighted balls.
yeah.
The amount of stress you put on the UCL and everything else.
Yeah, let's bring up the research studies on that one. That one makes sense.
It's basic.
Yeah.
One day in the news.
Yeah.
How much stress the actual 2-pound ball
Yep.
actually puts
But
on.
once again, we have shitty coaches that
Yeah.
see something
Well,
on Instagram or
That's
something
to throw that
cool, and we're
ball
gonna
at,
do it.
like under 15 miles an hour to keep the stress below
Yeah.
the snapping point in the UCL.
Yeah, and I think ultimately that's what this all comes down to is it's on us to guide people as best we can in that range, because you see stuff online and that's the first place people go, and it's like, oh, I could do that, and then it's just
You
mismanaged.
can for a little
short
bit.
term, temporarily, it might work.
It might work.
It might not, but it might work short term
Yeah.
temporarily.
Yeah.
But that short term success doesn't mean it's the best thing.
No,
Long
it's a long-term game that people don't always think about, but we can help them with that, and we have to just make sure we're very clear
Yeah.
about it right from the beginning, because I think most people come in and they're like, oh, my son wants to throw 75 by this fall. And like, that's not what we're here to do.
Or let's be realistic, and we can get him to throw harder, but why are we putting a number on it? I
Yeah,
hate
yeah.
that. And that's the other big thing too, is like all these kids that need to run a specific 60 time. Do you understand how difficult it is and how many different things go involved into running a great 60 time? Just for me to shave a point of a second off might take us 6 months. So like for you to have this realistic goal of like, oh, if I train for the next 3 months, this is X, Y, and Z is going to happen
It's not
too.
simple as running
It's
more.
being realistic. It's and
Yeah.
and also putting all this stuff into play. It's like it's crazy to me that people just think, oh, if I just show up, then this is also going to happen as well.
Well, I think that's where it comes. Like that's
Mhm.
I remember as a young athlete, like I kind of thought the same way.
hmm
So people, it's just like sharing the knowledge as best we can, as simply as we can,
Absolutely.
because I think people want so badly to do everything they can for their kids, or the athletes want so badly, they're like, I'll do anything, I'll do
Mhm.
whatever they show me online.
Right.
So we just have to like cut out all the fat and get this is what you need to do, and that's our job.
Well, because I think particularly kids don't have a lot of time. You know they don't drive, right? So like I think the other piece is like to tell parents like, hey, come in here 3 days a week, do this work here. Like I tell people, just like adults, like you would want to skip workouts just to go do other stuff, right? And expect that you get better results. Like the idea is you still got to prioritize the workouts and the strength conditioning and the intervention stuff along with all the team stuff. So if you're on 3 baseball teams over the summer and you can't prioritize that stuff, you're going to get hurt. Like that's how that works, right? And you're also going to see a decline in performance. So there's the argument to be like, do the one team, do the one, you know what I mean? Do the one sport. Like you were talking about like multi-sport athletes. I think that's why wrestling was really great for me, because I worked in so many different directions all the time and then went naturally stronger into baseball. If in theory, if I just trained a little more year round for those 2 sports and also prioritized the gym, all my natural performance would go up. So it's not like you can't do multiple sports and do it. It just becomes more complicated, but it doesn't mean it, and more time.
And you nailed it on the head. You did one sport.
Exactly.
Like you weren't on a travel team and this and that and thing is one team, give myself holistically to that team and give me everything you got instead of being on 6 different travel teams, money again, right?
Yeah.
And how is that supposed to help you? If
Yeah.
you do one team, like I've got guys that are only on one team per season, do multiple sports. They might play football, basketball, and baseball, but they're only doing one. They still have their time to come in here and do everything they need to do and their
Right.
homework and all that
Schedule
stuff.
at that point in
Exactly.
time.
And it's time management. I think that's the other thing is these parents too. If they have the time availability, they're going to put their kid in every single thing instead of just giving them time to be a freaking kid, which is wild as well.
And they'll learn the strength stuff. Like, I mean, I tell people, same to the parents, I say, if you come in here and you do S&C work in our gym, you're giving the kid life skills, right? Like, let's be real. 1% of the athletes in the youth level are going to go to that college level. Then 1% of those college guys are going to go to the pros. So if we really think about it, it's like the vast majority of kids who are in here are going to just learn how to like be a healthier human being. and how to be training and how to not be and be familiar in the weight room, like that's a huge benefit.
If
too.
their youth sports give them lifelong healthy habits that keep them healthy and functional and have a great quality of life until a long age, and they learn that from youth sports, that's the best thing we can do for the kids.
For sure, man. For sure.
Absolutely.
Cool. It's great.
Right.
All right,
Great job,
episode
guys.
1 in the books.
I like it.
Beauty.
Cool. Cool. Thanks. This was great.
Thought that was pretty smooth.
That was very
Pretty smooth.